How you doing, everybody? This is Andrew Goldberg here with Brendan Stout on MLL Roundtable. We are here actually on our new channel, Live Talk 365, as In Lacrosse We Trust launches its new 24/7 lacrosse coverage. We will have two shows on after us here, starting with us, MLL Roundtable, at 6 p.m. every Monday, and then it will be with Alex Urquhart and Eric Tyner immediately following us at 7 p.m., hosting NCAA Lax Weekly, as well as Over and Back with Scott Arnold at 8 p.m. Obviously, you know me, Andrew Goldberg, and Brendan Stout. Brendan, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, man. A little cold up here, with the snow and everything, but, doing pretty well. How about yourself?
About the same. Obviously, a lot of snow expected for tomorrow, about 3 to 6 inches by me. You said about 2 by you. I'm busy plowing and stuff. I'm sure you are as well.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Yeah, can't escape the snow, but luckily no lacrosse going on right now that isn't inside, obviously, because of the snow. And obviously, I got to take a little jab at Ian and Kyle, who couldn't join us today. Obviously, they have prior commitments that they had to attend to. But, me and you, we're like 100% on making shows, 3 for 3. I mean, we got to get some type of bonus for that, right?
Yeah, I feel you. What do you think? What should we say to Marissa? What do you think?
I don't know. Maybe we should actually ask her if we could get paid like a couple dollars a show or something.
Yeah.
But anyway, not to take jabs at Ian, because obviously Ian we had on the first show. Kyle is, actually Kyle just got engaged. I saw
Yeah.
on Twitter he announced it. So congratulations out to Kyle, and obviously Ian. We want him back, and obviously we'd like to have the Four Horsemen, I guess, all together. But you'll just have to settle for me and Brendan right now. So let's get right to it. You heard the intro, Superstar, and I played that song because the MLL supplemental draft was last Wednesday. It occurred around 2 o'clock via a conference call with all the teams. It was not open to the media, so we couldn't technically listen in on coaches or teams making their selections, but we did, obviously live tweet it through our feed at In Lacrosse We Trust, or at ILWT. And also the MLL also live tweeted the first couple rounds on their feed at MLL_lacrosse for the first couple rounds, and then teams obviously tweeted their selections later. Overall, there were a total of 96 players taken out of a humongous pool of 500 players. The full results can be seen on our website via the post by our boss, Marissa and Jemmy. She has all the pick-by-pick, and obviously there's analysis by other writers breaking down, who's picked and how it benefits our team. So really, let's start there, Brendan. Looking at everything that transpired with trades, with picks, who was picked when, and where they're going. I mean, what was the biggest surprise to you, or the biggest trades?
It's got to be the biggest trade, with Kyle Hartzell going to New York, Matt Gibson over to Rochester, or Denver, one of the two. Those Kyle Hartzell going to New York is one of the biggest moves that Coach Spallina and the Lizards organization made. CJ Cospiel's been great, but Kyle Hartzell just adds a whole new set of weaponry for the Lizards. Him with his 2-point bombs, and just his athleticism. That's probably the biggest trade I saw coming out of there. The biggest surprise.
Really, was there one? I mean, obviously there wasn't going to be a lot. I was looking at the full 500 names. I saw kids that I played against, played with. One of the kids on my team actually, applied to be on there. He knew he wasn't going to be picked. I actually talked to him. And I also saw, an All-American lawn stick midi from my conference, played at Scranton, Tim Cleary. He was on the list. I mean, a lot of D3 guys from random colleges. There were a lot of MCLA guys from, like, Oregon and Florida State, giving it a shot, since it seems like anyone can really apply. But, I mean, when you look through that list, there were just a lot of big names that you kind of recognize from college. Like, there were guys who had played in the MLL previously, like Ken Clausen, Bill McGlone, Jack Rice, Brendan Buckley, David DiMaria, Steven Ianzito, like all those guys. And then you had guys who, like, weren't really on a team per se, but were definitely, big names in college, like Zach Palmer, I don't think has played for a while. Like Pierce Bassett didn't play last year, but he was picked later on. There are a lot of, like, good players that were picked. So, did you really find a surprise based on, like, the players you expected to be picked?
Honestly, not really. I mean, Chesapeake went ahead and picked up, their two goalies in TC DiBartolo and what's his name? Tyler Fiorito. They were on the Chesapeake roster last year and the year before that, so I'm not really surprised by that. Like you said, Ken Clausen, he's been injury prone for the past couple of years with his knee and whatnot. I wasn't really surprised to see Denver pick him back up. One thing I'm actually not surprised, but I'm excited for is to see Jovan Miller back. He's a great athlete. He makes an impact when he gets on the field. He's a hustle. He's a hustler. He's a worker, and I'm actually really happy to see him with Coach Cottle, because I feel like Coach Cottle can do amazing things with him.
Yeah, when I look at the list of players that were taken, obviously, you did a preview for the offense for InLacrosseWeTrust.com, which you can obviously read. I did kind of a defensive preview, and based on some of the guys that I was looking at from last year, Brendan Buckley, he had a lot of time with Boston, and then he kind of was, like, phased out of the rotation when they had Ratliff and some of the other guys on the defensive end, and he didn't really see as much time as he did earlier in the year. He went to New York. I knew he was going to get picked. Tom Salentani, he got picked later in the draft. He was from UMass. I think he got picked by Boston, actually. He played like a couple of games. He played like a total of 4 games over the past 2 years. But the names I kind of really want to get to are Chaz Woodson, who didn't really play last year, but is a really good player. He went to Florida, which could, obviously, if he wants to play, would make them really good, because now they have Ryan Powell, and obviously they have Joe Walters and Kevin Crowley and all the great players they had from the Nationals, which could really be a fun team if Chaz Woodson came back, because I don't think he really wanted to play for Ohio, and especially because they went like 1-11 last year. Another name which was interesting to see was Sean Rogers getting picked up by Denver. Obviously they have Jesse Schwartzman, but Sean Rogers, in the game or two that he played in place of who did he play in place of? In place of Brian Phipps, he actually played pretty well, and I think the style of play in terms of his build and how he plays is similar to Jesse Schwartzman. He's a big goalie, takes up a lot of the cage. He is a very good goalie. Obviously, he was an All-American. Obviously, Schwartzman was an All-American in college and MLL goalie of the year. At Denver, I think they're kind of having they get the same guy back to back, whether they choose to Schwartzman misses some games, so they use Sean Rogers for those games because he misses time for the USA Championships. I like the fact that Rochester picked up Luke Cometti. He was from Syracuse, and he had like 50 or 60 points for Syracuse last year as an attackman. Considering how much Rochester lost, I think that's a really underrated pick, and he could be a guy who's kind of scary for them. Not scary, but he could definitely contribute for them, kind of like in a Matt White type of deal with Charlotte he did this year, as well as Rochester also picked up Steven Ianzito, who was a big part of Syracuse. They like their Rochester and Syracuse kind of in the same area, so it makes sense. But, Steven Ianzito is kind of the guy who's a great midi, two-way midi. He can play offense and a threat in transition. Lastly, two names before I kind of throw it back to you. Andrew Wiskovich, he's a goalie from Towson. I don't think he's going to make the team. I don't think they'll keep him. But he was an honorable mention All-American for Towson last year. I saw him in person play against Navy. He made some really good saves against a very solid Navy team and some clutch saves at the end. And obviously he was one of the top goalies in the nation in terms of save percentage and goals against average, and one of the reasons why Towson was good. And then Anthony Santomo, he was a long stick mini, honorable mention, going to Chesapeake. They get younger, a little younger at long stick midi. However, kind of the same thing with Andrew Wiskovich is I don't think he's going to see a lot of playing time because they just acquired Brian McGill, and obviously they have Jesse Bernhardt already there. Both guys play pole unless, you know, they bump both guys down to close, or they keep, you know, one of them at pole, or, you know, what's going on there. I mean, what do you think of those moves?
You know, you want to go younger. Some teams want to go younger just to get a good look at, you know, maybe the future of the league and all that. I mean, there's so many guys that teams can choose from nowadays. It's utterly ridiculous. Unfortunately, you know, there are only 8 teams in the league, which is holding back. I don't want to say holding back. It's not giving a lot of players a chance to develop for the league and whatnot. But, you know, I'm just happy to see that a lot of teams are going to try and go for, you know, the players that have maybe something there that someone else doesn't.
Right. I mean, we actually texted each other the day of that supplemental draft, and I was like, how the hell is Ken Clausen, first of all, on the list? And you kind of told me, you know, it's injury prone, as you mentioned before, but you'd also mentioned kind of an interesting point that I kind of want to bring up, which was the fact that you kind of thought maybe they should go to like a minor league system, kind of like an NHL, where they have like the ECL and like all these different leagues, so that players could play and gain experience, but they could call them up later on. You know, why did you really think that? Because, I mean, personally, I don't know if it would work for them, partly because obviously the league is not big enough, so therefore they're kind of just pulling a lot of players together and wasting more money that they may not have, and therefore kind of stunt any possible growth of moving a team to, like we said, say Philly or New Jersey, and kind of expanding the sport like we want to.
The only reason I thought that is just to keep these guys, you know, playing. You know, there's a bunch of men's leagues around that everybody plays in and whatnot, but at the same time, they play with kids. They play with guys that, you know, may not be at the same level that these MLL players are at. My idea behind it is that, you know, you get a farm system going, and it keeps the level of competition, if you will, you know, at that high level. So, I mean, that's my thought behind that. But, you know, it like you said, I mean, there may not be enough money for something like that, but, you know, you never know.
Right. I mean, obviously, we'd love to see like you know, a minor league type system, or just any type of growth towards, you know, I guess lacrosse, or I mean for lacrosse, in terms of putting teams either in Atlanta or you know, I don't know, South Carolina. Well, not South Carolina because that's not realistic, but, you know, bring it back to LA, bring it back to San Francisco, bring it back to even New Jersey or Philly, like we mentioned before. Just some type of growth that we see, because, you know, we had mentioned on our previous show, I think we looked at, you know, moving, once the Nationals announced they were going to go down to Florida, it's like, you know, where do we think the next team is going to pop up? And we referenced the time a couple of years ago, I want to say in 2007, 2008, somewhere around there, where the MLL expanded, I guess, too quickly. They tried to go with 12 teams or somewhere around that number, split into 2 divisions, and make it kind of like a true East-West type of league, but they did it so fast that they ended up contracting about like half the teams they expanded to, and then we were left with, you know, 6 to 8 teams right after that. So, speaking of growth, one name I do want to mention is Devin Wills, who is a women's goalie, who actually a really good one, in fact, who entered the supplemental player pool and hope to get picked. Just a little background on Wills. She excelled in the women's game. Obviously, she was a two-time All-World goalie in the women's game. Obviously, she was also had a good impact as a field player, most notably earning MVP honors at the 2009 Vail Lacrosse Shootout. She actually ended up not being picked, but Brendan, I know you have some breaking news on her, which we'll tell our listeners right now.
Well, breaking news is she was just picked up by the New York Lizards in the player pool. So she will be at training camp in April. I think one reason why Joe Spallina picked her up is because he is the Stony Brook women's head coach. So he might see something in her that, he absolutely wants to put into the MLL.
Now, I do want to tell our listeners that this isn't the first time that a women's the professional lacrosse league has quote unquote broken down the barriers of the gender barrier, because she actually joins Ginny Capricciani, former NLL lacrosse goalie who played with the New Jersey Storm, as the only other woman to break the gender barrier in pro lacrosse. Ginny actually played in the Storm's 2003 season finale. She made 7 saves on 6 goals in 11 minutes. And actually, Brendan, fun fact, ding, 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 is that Ginny actually was an assistant at my school for the women's lacrosse team for the last couple years. So, I mean, that was just a fun fact. But going back to Wills, I want to kind of look at how you think she'll fare, because I played goalie. Obviously, you played a lot of lacrosse yourself. You know the goalie position probably just as well as I do. And Joe Walters, great attackman for the Hamilton Nationals, or former Hamilton Nationals, now Florida Launch, tweeted this the day of, or actually right after the supplemental draft. He said, "No disrespect to Devin Wills, and it's a great story, but do we really think she can handle the high heat? Hashtag real talk." Brendan, what do you think about those shots being fired?
Walters, he's, played at the highest level of college, and now he's up in the pros playing both NLL and MLL. So he obviously has a better insight to the pace of the league than probably we do, since we never played that level. But Wills plays internationally. If there's a women's pro league, she'd probably be one of the top goalies in that league. It's difficult to say whether or not she'll make it. I have never personally seen her play before. I'm actually probably going to look her up on YouTube later on and see how see her skills. But maybe there's something that Joe Spallina sees that we don't. Maybe he has talked to her, has seen her in action, has maybe even took some shots on her, or had someone take some shots on her to see if she could handle the high heat. But that's one thing that's really, in a sense, I want to say a little different in the men's and women's league, is that the men's shooting 114 miles per hour, and that coming at somebody as small as Wills, is maybe not, since we're goalies, we have screws loose up in our head. So obviously we don't really care about, getting hit with the ball. But, the speed of the shot is different compared to, some women's game, some women. So, it really matters if, she can, withstand her ground.
Right. Actually, I want to bring up something that you just said. You said, obviously there's a huge difference as to playing goalie in men's lacrosse as to women's lacrosse. Men's lacrosse, they're, the top shot. Women's lacrosse is probably like 70-something miles per hour. Men's, it's 110, like you said. That's 40 miles per hour. That's a humongous difference. Granted, women have to shoot in a certain place, and the shots are coming from a lot closer, so 70 miles per hour, quote-unquote, in a depth, like, from where it's coming from is technically quicker from 8 yards at 70 miles per hour, but as a goalie who played in college, granted D3, I wasn't great, 48 save percentage, middle of the pack D3 school. There's a huge difference between seeing a shot from 8 yards at 70 miles per hour and seeing that same shot at 90 miles per hour. Because if you do even the slightest bit wrong, you're gonna get shell shocked in it. And one person who actually has shot on her was current Michigan men's lacrosse assistant coach Ryan Dennehy, who played for Dartmouth and he played during the time that Wills played at Dartmouth, and Wills played for the women's team, obviously, and they made the 2006 NCAA semifinals. He shot on her a lot and actually tweeted this to Lacrosse Magazine, and he said, quote, "I've shot on at Devin3 Wills if you want to follow her for years. She's the real deal, ... I wish her the best luck." Granted, I've never heard of this guy before. Granted, Dartmouth lacrosse isn't that great. So, I mean, look, Ryan Dennehy is far and away better lacrosse player than I am, and I'm sure you are. And he'll know a lot more about lacrosse and intricacies than I will, or maybe you will. So, I mean, what do you think of his comments? I mean, I don't totally agree with them, but obviously he's seen something.
I mean, it depends on, in a sense of, you can rip shots on a goalie in practice all day, every day. You'll get some by, you'll hit them and whatnot. But in a game situation, the speed is completely different. I mean, these guys are shooting from no angle and, dunking behind the friggin' net, crying out loud. So, I mean, like you said earlier, with the women shooting in certain areas, they have to shoot certain areas in certain spots and whatnot. I mean, these shots are coming from, 20 yards out, maybe even 25 sometimes. You never know. These guys, with Matt Danowski shot from midfield at the end of the championship game last year. These guys are Drew Westervelt, shot the ball, I don't even know how hard. In, I think it was the Hamilton game or the Charlotte game, just from like maybe 5-10 feet out and just ripped it past the goalie. So it's not like these guys are holding back on anybody. So I mean, if she can take one shot the wrong way, and that would be it. So I mean, but I give her absolutely all the credit for coming out and going out for the MLL, and if she succeeds, that's awesome for her, and hopefully she doesn't get hurt or anything.
Right. I mean, one other point I want to bring up is that Ginny Capricciani, she obviously played in the NLL, which is a lot different than playing in the MLL, because in the NLL, obviously you're covered head to foot in padding. So your body, I mean, you're like a NHL goalie with a lacrosse stick between your legs. I mean, you are basically throwing your body at anything, and it really doesn't matter how hard they shoot it, because you got like 4 inches of padding just covering the blow, and you barely feel anything. So I feel like, from a personal perspective, it's so much easier playing the NLL than the MLL, and you're a little less prone to throw your body in front of it, because you got a huge rubber ball coming 100 miles per hour at your shin. Let's see how she reacts when she gets a couple shots right to the shin, or wherever. Obviously, she's gotten it from 70 miles per hour in women's lacrosse. I'm not going to doubt her toughness. That's like a low blow. Obviously, if she proves me wrong, great for her. Obviously, wonderful for her. She gets all the credit in the world for. Granted, she gets credit for signing on to a lacrosse team, first of all. Obviously, I could have put my name into the thing, I wouldn't have got picked up. So credit to her to getting on a team, but when you play outside, there are a lot of different elements that come with playing goalie, like you said. Obviously, they're coming from all angles, not just like a shooting area like in women's lacrosse. Obviously, the release based on how the stick is strung in the women's game is a lot different than the men's. Men's has a little less of a quick release than women's, obviously because they don't have a high pocket, or they have a high pocket. Ours is deeper for obvious reasons. But let's see what happens when some guy's coming across and he's, from 5 yards, doesn't look like he's going to shoot, and he just rips one top corner on her. And, that's a shot that somehow, Jesse Schwartzman is going to save, or one of those guys. I mean, it's just a totally different game. I don't know if she'll ever play. I don't even know if she'll stay on after training camp. But obviously, that's the one thing that's great about sports, obviously lacrosse is that, what's seen on paper, anything can happen. Whether she's a woman, a man, it really doesn't matter because she can prove us all wrong. And, we'll just sit here looking stupid. So I think that's great for her. I guess one other question, just to cover all angles, is do you think the Lizards are doing this? Lizards / the MLL, I don't know, whatever you want to say, are doing this for a publicity move, or do you think they're actually taking her on because they believe that she's a good goalie and she can actually help them win? Like you said, I mean, you text me Drew Adams isn't going to be there, and you expect maybe them to pick somebody in college, out of college. So what do you think about that?
I'm going to say they're picking her up for her being a good goalie. And the reason why I say that is because of what I said earlier. Joe Spallina is the head women's coach at Stony Brook. So obviously he has more of an inside look to her skills and whatnot than we do, like I said. So I don't think it's really a publicity stunt, but I think that Spallina's picking her up because she is a good goalie. Hopefully Adams makes the USA team and, dominates for Team USA, go red, white, and blue. But, and that's the other thing, maybe, they might even go pick up another goalie in the draft in, Nico Mato or Austin Kaut. But I don't think it's publicity stunt. I think they're picking her up because she's a real deal.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we aren't there to know exactly what the mentality is, and like you said, he is the Stony Brook head coach, women's head coach. So it's not like he's really doing this for publicity stunt or getting the headlines of ESPN or anything. Granted, this isn't going to get in the headlines of ESPN because really, it's not on that type of level nationally unless it's college Final Four during Memorial Day weekend. And even then,
Right.
maybe pushed off for baseball or something. But, at this point, they're not really. The MLL isn't really here to make headlines. They're like most sports in their infancy, I guess. I mean, obviously they want to try and do that, but they're going to do that with the players they market, like a Paul Rabel and stuff, who get on the magazine of the body issue of ESPN or get on commercials of Under Armour with like Cam Newton and stuff, and they're doing something for Dick's Sporting Goods, and boom, Paul Rabel's there, or Nike with Max Seabald. All of a sudden he's there, and it's like, oh, cool, like, I play lacrosse, like, Max Seabald's there. He's, I watch him at Cornell. He's one of the best players in the MLL. Like, hey, maybe I want to get, like Nike gloves. Like, that's kind of the background psychology that once granted basic one, but they try to have that type of impact. Obviously, I would think Wills is getting it based on her merit and not because, hey, she's a woman, let's just take a flyer on her, because, like you said, they could pick, there are 3 or 4 great goalies coming out in this year's NLL draft. Nico Amato out of Maryland, Austin Kaut out of Penn State, and then you have Brian Feeney coming out of Penn. All those guys lead top 10, 15 defenses and also rank in the top 5 or 10 respectively last year in goals against average, save percentage, all that stuff. So, I think it'll be an interesting development. Obviously, Drew Adams is one of the best in the game, and he'll play most of the games. And who's their backup?
Oh, crap, what's his name?
I would say it's not anybody, like, big time, I guess, right?
I forget his name, man.
Yeah, I mean, either way, like, I mean, he was a backup for a reason, and it's not like they're they're gonna put Wills over him. They're gonna see, like, they bring 3 goalies. Some teams choose to keep 2 goalies. Some teams choose to keep 3. Obviously, flexing that roster spot for an extra field player. But I think it's a good story. I think it will be interesting to see in the coming weeks what happens, not only in terms of how it impacts how the team drafts for the MLL collegiate draft and whether they take a goalie for if Drew Adams makes the Team USA roster or not, and therefore if Adams makes it, obviously they need someone to step in for that week or two that the games are going on. So just to change gears here, obviously we hope Devin Will is the best and hope she proves us wrong. We talked about growth in terms of the player level and, the gender base, breaking down the barriers in terms of that. Now let's shift gears to going back to the game of lacrosse expanding to to other cities. Because the MLL in the last week or two also announced that they're returning to Atlanta, Georgia for the 2014 championship weekend. It will be held at Kennesaw University in and around Atlanta. So, Brendan, what do you think about the championship weekend as a whole being moved down there?
No, it needs to come back to Philly, man. It needs to come back to Philly. Come on. Going down south. No, I'm just kidding, though. I'm excited to see the game, expand and, the MLL going for different markets and, going down to Atlanta. They had a game or two down in Atlanta last year, I believe, with Rochester and Hamilton. That one was in Florida. But, they did have some games down there. But I'm excited. I mean, they had a good amount of fans there. I think it was over 4,000 people maybe at that game, which is not bad at all for an MLL game. I'm excited. I'm excited to see it expanding and going. Atlanta might be the next spot to go. I mean, I know they're more than likely bringing a team back to Hamilton in 2015, which would make an uneven amount of teams. Now, my thought is they might be announcing a new team along with, the Hamilton Nationals coming back. I'm excited.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, not to take any jabs at Philly, even though I'm from New Jersey. I'm not a big fan of Philly and their fans because I think they're all jerks and they're mostly idiots.
You're a Giants fan, aren't you?
But, last year's event, you kind of saw it. It was kind of like, it wasn't in the greatest of places at PPL Park. It was like, don't get me wrong, the park, where they play soccer, the Philadelphia Union, where they play soccer, is really nice. It looks onto the river, and you could see the bridge and all that stuff. Great view when you're in the stadium. Right outside the parking lot, though, it's basically like gravel, dirt. Houses don't look that great in the area. The media area just doesn't look great. If they are going to bring it back to Philly, I was talking with one of my friends. I would feel like he made a really good point as to saying, they got to bring it back to like a college atmosphere type place like Villanova or maybe not Drexel or like UPenn, because that's not in the greatest of areas either, but like Villanova or St. Joe's or somewhere around there if they're going to do it, because the venue would be big enough where they could attract like a lot of fans and there are things to do around the area. Granted, they haven't done like I feel like they didn't do that great of a job really look like I don't know about advertising it, but like when we went in, Brendan, they were like, I think you had mentioned it or Rocco or somebody. You guys were like, wait, this is it? Like, they have like one Maverick bus set up and like a credit savings union tent set up, and that's really it. Like, where are the players like promoting the event? Where are the other sponsors kind of promoting their stuff? It was kind of like half. I can't say the other word, but like it kind of just felt like they put half the effort into what they were doing.
Yeah, it wasn't the biggest. Like the outside of it wasn't the biggest area where you could put a whole lot of vendors and stuff like that. I mean, the one side of the stadium is a parking lot. Not really gravel or anything. I mean, I feel like they could have just used that area as a vending area. Put more vendors out there and whatnot. Um, but maybe they thought about tenants and whatnot. Do they really want that many vendors there? Do they want to have to yeah, I mean, if they did have more vendors there, it probably, I don't want to say wouldn't attract more people because, I mean, a lot of the people at the championship game were from Maryland, for like Fort Chesapeake. You had some decent Hounds fans there. After the Outlaws lost, I don't think really many of them came back to the stadium.
They had a surprising showing though. They had I mean, when I parked there was like a strong showing of Outlaws fans that brought like a huge like cook off and stuff, and then obviously there was JoJo banging his drum and walking around. I mean, granted, some of the Outlaw fans were from Jersey. Actually, now that I remember, like I know the family kid I play with. His best friend plays for the team
Right.
Pennington plays for them, and like his family just like brought like everything down there, like food, grills, like whatever you name it. But I mean, they traveled pretty well, and obviously they hold. There's a great fan base in Denver. Charlotte, there were like a couple diehards there, but I think like the whole entire attendance for the weekend was like 4,000 people.
Yeah, it wasn't as big as it should have been. Maybe it was the location, like you said. Not many people are going to drive down to Chester for that. I mean, right down the road was, like Ridley, with, Timmy Pierce, he's from Ridley, who was one of the writers. He lives in Ridley. Ridley's a big lacrosse area, obviously. Uh, you know, um, the main line with, Haverford and Radnor and all those guys, they're right down the road as well. And I'm really surprised a lot of those kids didn't come out. But at the same time, it's like, it's location, location, location. PPL Park, like you said, beautiful park, right underneath the bridge, right on the river, just absolutely gorgeous view. The stadium itself is just beautiful. But, the location can hurt a venue.
Right, and I think that's where Atlanta comes in. Obviously, Atlanta has experience, hosting humongous events. They've hosted two Super Bowls previously. They hosted an Olympic Games. They've hosted two NCAA Women's Final Fours for basketball, and then obviously for the men's Final Fours as well. In the 4-year rotation between them, San Antonio, Indianapolis, and one other place somewhere. Anyway, get back to the point. Like Atlanta, I think is a really good step for lacrosse. Obviously, they had some good showings previously. Obviously, they wouldn't bring it back if they didn't think that. And obviously, the area is good enough that there are things to do. People are going to want to be there. Obviously, it's in Kennesaw State University, which I've actually never heard of. But I'm sure it's right in the Atlanta area, and it's a great time around it. Obviously, the campus is, I would assume the campus is probably pretty good looking down there. I mean, it's not like MLL is going to pick a bad campus. So I think it's going to be a good choice down there. And I think it'll be a good step. And like you said, maybe they expand down there to Atlanta next year when they bring back quote-unquote Florida to Hamilton, or they keep a Florida team down there, make Hamilton, or like recreate Hamilton, however you want to say it, put an Atlanta team in, and then I guess what would your top 3 picks be for like the team that would even that out in the divisions?
Ooh. You mean by location or what?
I mean, just anything, like obviously location, but just who I guess not the team, but like what city would pop up as the next venue. I mean, we've talked about this before, but
yeah. I mean, if they're gonna put I mean, it'll honestly depend on how the championship weekend goes down in Atlanta. If they have the amount of people that they had this year at Philly, they might be rethinking somewhere. I mean, they have a team down in Charlotte, which is a great venue down there. If Kyle was on here, he'd be raving about it right now, obviously. Um, they got a team in Maryland with the Bayhawks, and now a team down in Florida. Um, like you said, Atlanta's not a bad venue at all. One place I would definitely be looking is out west somewhere. I mean, we got the team in Denver, but maybe like you said, L.A. or San Fran. Maybe even Seattle. I mean, Seattle's fan base is huge for the Seahawks.